and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. My name is Shogun. Joining me today is my good friend Drew for his second podcast. Last time we talked about ceremonial magic, very good discussion. But today we're going to get into some very otherworldly experiences that Drew has had. And the topic of today's discussion is crossing the abyss and contacting angels. Should be very interesting indeed. And I've heard a little bit of the story, and I wanted to make sure I got this recorded because it's quite a story of interdimensional travel, so to speak. Before we get started, make sure you've joined the Roundtable Discord server. Check out hashtag RT Podcast. Join us on YouTube Live, and BitChute. Like, follow, subscribe, and check out our over 200 great podcasts available there. That being said, welcome, Drew. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really good today. Thank you for having me, and I'm really glad to talk about this topic, and I think it's going to be really interesting. So I'm glad to start whenever you are.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. So you described the podcast as crossing the abyss and contacting angels, and we want to get into that. So where do you want to start? Because I was thinking about maybe you should share the experience that you had of sort of traveling to the other dimension. Do you think that's a good place to start?
Yeah, I'm definitely okay with reading that poem that describes the experience I had. I'm totally cool with that. And then I would like to first mention that the experience that one has after the crossing of the abyss is completely unique to almost every individual. Every once in a while, there will be nuances to this where people will have similar experiences, just like people when they have DMT breakthroughs will find similarities to their trips from time to time. So there's the same similarity to this. But yeah, I would love to read this poem for y'all, and it's an experience I had after the crossing of the abyss, because that is simply a transition. But let me pull it up on my phone real quick, and I'll read it for you.
Perfect.
The night was on a harvest moon. Gods beckoned me. Go forth to the wild and breathe again. I rose from my zombie state and ripped away the shackles that be, for she calls to me, and I cannot ignore her call. I go back to the wild. There I was, sovereign and free, laying beneath her full gaze. Awe strikes my heart like lightning breaking free from the grasp of gods. I gasp for 4 folds, pulls me up in 2. There I lay, like a pharaoh in his tomb, resting, breathing, waiting on nothing. My body begins to glow and vibrate, my breath synchronized with the trees, as mother pulls me close into her embrace. 4 folds pulls me closer too. Deep in the earth's womb, thud, thud, thud. In terror, I awaken, but not where I was once before. Along and in a wall I am now. My skin is gone, my eyes are gone, my mouth is gone, my ears, they're gone. I've never felt so clearly. Along these halls stands bones, and a spinal column for a ceiling. Vessels streak through every wall, and through me, for the foundation was now a rib cage. Within each segment is another me, or you, all are still asleep. A deep vibrates these halls, and a sacred knowledge was given unto me. I say thank you, or something less familiar than my tongue can offer here. A servitor approaches me and demands I go back home, and I've seen too much. I feel it was protecting me from being seen by something or someone, maybe me. And I woke up after that experience, and there's more details I can go into about that, because that's only like a poem of the experience, and was the best way I could describe the feelings of immense transcendence and fear, almost to a degree. But in the end, it ended up being very enlightening.
Oh, you guys reading poems?
Yeah, just hold on, Traveler. We're doing a podcast, and we'll have an open discussion and question and answer after. But now that you've read the poem, do you want to give us the sort of the circumstance in which you had this experience, or how this actually came about?
Sure, I'd love to. And I didn't realize what had happened until much later into my research of what the practices I was doing evoked and whatnot. I was in my first order, the first pillar in ceremonial magic, which is just basics. For the first year, you do basics: breath work, energy work, visualizations, and you get on a hefty regimen and you stick with it for the first year. And after the first year you would move on, which we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But I was simply in the first phase, and I think this happened by accident. I don't think I was supposed to stumble into this deep of an experience as I did. It was very much, I was outside and I was doing my lunar breath work, and I was laying down. I usually sit up in like lotus position, but this time I felt the urge to like lay like a pharaoh. Every once in a while when I go to do like lucid dreaming or something at night, I will lay like a pharaoh, and it provokes a more uh, immersive feeling and experience when I have lucid dreams when I lay like that. So I just decided to do the same thing while doing my breath work, and I was laying on concrete, might say first, and I'm laying down and I'm doing the four folds and I'm looking up and I close my eyes, and then inside the ground I could hear like a knock, thud, 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 and it scared me. I jerked up and I was like, whoa, okay, freaked me out, and then I just was like, let it go and lay back down. It was probably in my head, right? So I just lay back down and I go back into my four folds, go back into my visualization, and the thud hit me in the back of the head. And when I woke up this time from the meditation, I woke up somewhere else. And I was not me anymore to a degree. Like it was like my brain was trying to struggle to maintain my individuality while crossing over, it seemed like. And that strife I had with myself was the experience of peeling myself out of a wall, right? It's not literal. This is metaphorical for the experience. And as I like wake up, I realize everything around me is alive. Everything has consciousness. And the only way I could describe this feeling is by describing as if it's an organic life form that I'm inside of, right? And that's where I was going in that direction when I start describing it almost like it's a little bit of like a hellscape, but that's not actually what the experience was truly like. It was much more profound and a little scary at first, but it was also very like, oh, we're alive. Everything's alive. Wow. And this thing, as I'm having this experience, comes up to me and it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You are not supposed to be awake. Go back to sleep. Pretty much. And I was like, oh, okay. Bye bye. And it like injected me and put me back to sleep. I don't know if it injected me or it just had thin arms. Like it was such an abstract experience, it's hard to describe what it did. But it essentially put me back to sleep, whatever it did. And I woke up from that experience and didn't know what had happened until I started getting deeper into my research. Um, I don't think I'd ever be willing to go back over there because there was a clear reason why I was put back to sleep to a degree. I would say that. And yeah, ever since then, it's really opened my eyes to we're capable of traveling dimensions and realities with our minds, and you never really know when it's going to happen in certain scenarios. And as a neophyte, that was only in the beginning of my practices. I should not have been able to accomplish that until well in the journey of a magus, but I just was very fortunate, I suppose. Um, but yeah, so that was the experience.
And you told me that when you went there, you found yourself in a world very similar to our world, but also in every way different. So, can you just give us as much detail as you can on what you actually saw there and what you found in that place? Sensations, experiences, entities, like, because most people will never go there. So, any
Right.
information you can give us would be valuable.
I hear you. I'll do the best of my abilities. So, when I woke up and I described the feeling of not having skin, eyes, or anything of that nature, um, that was a separation of my ego and the individuality and tools we use to sense reality here. So when I crossed over, I was sensing things in a whole different light that is almost describable to perceiving an omnidimensional reality, or like a higher dimensional reality, like the sixth or fifth dimension or something like that. Like the shapes and the life forms and the communication and everything about the environment is so far above us that it is very, very, very difficult to truly transcribe it and give it to you in words. But the best I can do is everything was alive and moving, was very much sentient, was very much full of love and light and care. It was not darkness. It was very welcoming, like it was almost like home. But again, it's strange to me because I'm so used to being here. I think that one day maybe all of us will experience this place. And I think I was just in a hallway or something, and I just happened to wake up. Or like the me peeling through the wall was opening the veil of Parketh, which is the act of crossing the abyss, because the abyss is the moment between this reality and that reality. It's the world between worlds, and it's almost a brief moment, I would say, where that veil opens up and the other world is just there. But it was alive. It was very organic, but it was also like a metallic structure as well. I don't know if anybody here has seen some of H.R. Geiger's work. He did the work for like Aliens, the movie. Um, Now, it was not as horrific as that at all. I would say it was much more psychedelic and colorful and full of life, but the same semblance of like cyborgnetic, uh, like walls and ceilings and floors that are all like alive and sentient. It is beyond me how to explain it. Um, and it's like almost like everything had eyes too. Like if you notice, like my profile picture, I've always had this profile picture because that's what like some people talk about like having in like psychedelic trips and stuff, is they can see the world looking back at them. And that's very much what it felt like in this environment. Everything was looking back at me.
Uh, Sorry. And when you think about this experience, do you believe that it was some kind of dream state, subconscious, internal state? Or do you believe that you actually went to a dimension that exists outside of yourself, whether you're there or not?
I genuinely do, and it was a struggle I had with myself after this experience. And this is in the previous episode, at the very end of it, we talked about some of the dangers of these practices. And I would say that this experience has that potential of danger, and that there's this moment where you're either crazy and you're the only one that's ever experienced this, or many, many people out there having the same experience and just don't know how to describe it in our tongue, our language, and the way we communicate. Because these are such grandiose experiences that it is very, very hard to transcribe them. It's in like the way some people say it's impossible to describe God, and that it's almost like a futile effort to a certain extent, because no matter what we say, it'll never match up to the glory of what it really is. So uh, that comes a lot into play with the confliction one will have from this kind of experience. It it can drive a man crazy. It really can. I would explain it as like there was this individual that was obsessed with the Matrix, absolutely obsessed with it, and wanted to escape the Matrix, so much so he harmed individuals around him because of this grandiose delusion of the Matrix. And there's a way to get out of it. I just have to break the Matrix to escape, essentially. And so I could see that same potential in a lot of mentality, that people would hold such deep reverence for these kind of experiences. They'd be willing to act out physically in reality to try and escape this world. But for me, I had that brief moment where I was like, oh my God, everything's not real. This is an illusion. We're all one consciousness, that kind of cliche saying that will pop up from time to time in spiritual communities. And this is an experience that individuals have, and it's a sense of unity. Sometimes it's really, really good for people. Sometimes it's really, really bad. It's very hard to explain it. It's almost like the same as like with psychedelics. Like depending on the individual and their subjective reality, how they react to that chemical and the experience that chemical provokes is going to be completely unique each time. And it could be said the same for these kind of exploration of these other dimensions. I do think it is possible for anyone to do these kind of things, but I just would not recommend it for everybody. It almost screwed me up. I still to this day am not willing to go down to the final degree within magic. I find it much more useful and practical just to stay within the first and second order. Um, but yeah, long story short, the experience did make me question my own sanity, whether it was real or not. But now I deeply feel it was real, and it had a very deep impact on my life.
So you use the term angels. Do you understand angels from like a Judeo-Christian point of view as like servants of God, or how do you understand angels exactly? What do you think that they are?
I think that angels are sentient beings that work with reality like we do. I don't know, and this is a large assumption, and I could be wrong, but I think angels have the same communication with God that we do. Like yes, there's this deep connection to source, but we all can only talk to it directly in a certain way. And I think they have that same struggle or strife as well. Um, I do see them in the Judaic system as the cherubim, seraphim, and ophanim, if I'm correct. I hope I did not butcher those pronunciations. But these are, again, these are descriptions of these omnidimensional beings. It's impossible to fully describe them, but I think that the Bible does it incredibly poetically, and I use that imagery a lot. And I would say that from the experiences I've had when making encounters, which I've only had a few, that the Bible does the best job of describing these things. But I would not say it's as literal as the Bible would make it. You can see those kind of images rotating around spiritual communities here lately within the past like 3 years. It was not so much popular up until lately, it seemed like, and so more people are more and more familiar with this iconography and symbolism. I think the wheel with the eyes, right? Like that's a really good description for when you meet one of these things, or beings. Forgive me, that's probably disgraceful to say things. But I hope that explains it for a large degree, that I think they do have the same amount of communication we do with God. And that, yeah, they are essentially servants, yeah.
Okay, so that explains the angels essentially. What do you understand the abyss to mean? Because you said crossing the abyss. So what would be the abyss, do you think?
I'm going to use an analogy because this is very, again, one of these very fickle, hard to describe events in meditation. But in very large airports, there's the Amtrain that takes you to your terminal, right? I would view the flight as the meeting of the other side and meeting divinity or meeting angels, right? And getting a higher access to these other dimensions as the flight. But the Amtrain is the crossing of the abyss. It gets you from one spot to the other spot. And through the abyss, you set your ego aside, right? And we talked a little bit about the HGA before in the last episode, but the HGA actually plays a role in you crossing the abyss. He's kind of like the gatekeeper, so to speak, to the abyss for humanity. So, or she doesn't have a gender, forgive me, but yeah, it's just a point. It's just a traveling point. You cross the abyss into a higher realm of reality. But that's just like the crossing of the abyss is like a shedding of the skin and the mortal vessel.
I see. So since you had this experience, have you been back to that dimension again in any way? Have you been to other worlds than that? Or is that the only time that you found yourself completely immersed in an alternate reality?
I think it will be a very, very long time before I ever attempt to go up there again. It it was very intimidating. It was that powerful of experience. It was extremely intimidating and overwhelming. I don't think I'd ever like to go back, and it's not that it was that unpleasant of an experience or anything like that. It's just overwhelming. And that I got what I needed to know. And I would say the same for, like, I keep using the example of psychedelics because it's very much like a breakthrough experience. It's like this little voice in my head comes to me all the time and it says, you may not need this anymore. I think you've had enough. You know what I mean? It's just this little voice that's like, this is, you get the idea. Move on. Move on. We're here for a reason, okay? And I view the crossing and going over there as a solution for a lack of spirituality and faith. Like, that experience provided me with a profound faith in something more. And I will forever be a different person because of that experience. I'm grateful for it, but I don't need to learn that lesson again. I think I learned it very well, and I'd like to stay on my bike in the earthly realm for a while. I might go back one day if I deeply need to get that close to divinity again, but until then, I think I'll be okay.
So do you believe that the realm that you went to was the afterlife that people go to when they die, and you just went there before you had passed away? Or do you think this is a world that only certain people go to? Like, is this somewhere everyone's going to go eventually and you just got a sneak peek? Or is this a world that only certain people will ever go to?
I am not sure. I'm going to be honest. I would say that it was a beautiful experience in that if there was a heaven and this is the place we go, I would welcome where I went. Because it very much felt like home. It wasn't like scary in the sense of like a horrifying nightmare or anything like that. It was scary in the sense of like, I'm a human and I'm experiencing something so far above me, it's overwhelming. Like, a roller coaster is a lot of fun in the same way it's a little scary. Like, it's crazy trip. So I would say where I went, I think most people would be very happy to return there once our days are done. And I do think there is a certain obstacles here in the earthly realm that are going to play the role in keeping us from having this experience and reincarnating back. This goes down the rabbit hole of like a belief I have come accustomed to through my research and whatnot, and it's the most aligning with my own philosophy, and that is the ego plays a very important role here, but not after. It's just for here, and it's a very useful tool here. But the more attached we are to that ego, the harder it's going to be to let go of it and to go home, so to speak. And so I think that is what keeps us here. And like, for example, to bring it all back to the ceremonial magic, it is the practice of cleaning the spiritual residue of the ego away so that you are a lighter soul. And you can see this play out in like the story of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where your heart is weighed on the scale of Anubis, and like, if it's not as light as a feather, you don't ascend, so to speak. And so in the same right as what we're talking about now, that plays out as well, is that our ego isn't necessarily a sin, but it's very, very heavy, and it's a tool meant for here, so it doesn't get to cross over. And so if we aren't willing to let go of that weight, that baggage, when the time comes, where it's all due for us, then we might come back. And I think it's a choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with reincarnation. In fact, I think reincarnating is probably more honorable because we're coming down here and we're co-creating with the Creator. We're here to experience the boundless beauty that is life. And so there's no like right or wrong in this. It comes down to the individual. Do they want to continue and keep coming back and having these beautiful experiences and meeting beautiful people like we do every day and experiencing life, or just, going back home? I really do think it's that simple, and that through meditations, practices, you will come to peace with whether you'd like to keep incarnating or whether you'd like to ascend. The truth is there's no wrong answer, and that's a beautiful thing about it. We're all welcome to stay here.
So when it comes to the afterlife, you believe we have a choice in what happens to us, or do you believe it's determined by something like our karma or the judgment of God?
I would say that it comes down to choice a little bit, right? But yeah, our karma is deeply interconnected with the ego. The ego interacting with the world creates good and bad karma, right? So whatever karma you have is that said residue of your ego and what keeps us here. So that's where the phrase of like having good karma comes from. It's like a balance scale. You don't want to be like perfect, but you want to do enough that you're not causing horrible butterfly effects in the world. Because all that weight does come back to you. Those are things that hold us back and hold us here. And I think that the process of making an amends is possible too. I think we all have a chance for, making an amends and starting over and living a good life for the rest of the life. And by that point, it's like a spiritual journey. And the individual still, again, is left with a choice of like, do they enjoy being here? Do they enjoy the experiences enough to keep coming back and helping the world be a better place, or to just, I've spent my time. I'd like to move on for a while. And I think we'll all go up there, hang out for like a few million years, and be like, all right, time to go back. Since the time is now. Like, I genuinely think that it's always a choice in that sense. But the baggage of our karma is going to very much affect how hard that journey to and from the afterlife and here is going to affect deeply. Yeah.
So humans are capable of going to these other dimensions. Are beings from these other dimensions also capable of coming here somehow, do you think? Can they influence us if we don't go to their dimensions, or is that the only way that connection can happen? Like, do you think it goes both ways?
I would say yes, it can go both ways. People hear stories all the time of people in great, great distress and beings coming to them and helping them understand and gifting them knowledge and things of this nature. There's all sorts of stories like this, and I think that a lot of them hold a lot of weight. But I do think that it's a very special circumstance because it comes down to an individual's capability, right? Like, if someone should see an omnidimensional being, that could drive anyone crazy. Like, if especially without the understandings of angels. Like, imagine an individual on an island, right, that has never encountered anything of that nature or even heard of it in tales. And that comes down and interacts with them, it's going to really mess them up. So it's a circumstantial thing, but I do think it's possible.
So, is there any, kind of takeaway for the ordinary person in terms of, I don't know. I mean, would you even encourage people to try and achieve this kind of state, or would you say they should stay away from it?
I would say it is worth it to an extent if you are a seeker of truth, if you are well read in the occult philosophies and anything spiritual, meditations of that nature, you crave these otherworldly experiences. If that's what you crave, yeah, you can do it. You're welcome to. But I would not recommend it to the individual that is scared of their own sanity. I think that it could backfire. And it's not something I would recommend for everybody because, again, this is everyone's own journey. For me in particular, I think it was a beautiful experience. It was worth it in my shoes, and that there are plenty of people out there that could get a lot from it. But it's a troublesome road. I would say it adds a few years to your takes away a few years even from the experience, like how heavy the experience is. Uh, but yeah, if if you got tough skin and you can cope with other realities, it's worth it. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that story. I'm wondering if you agree this might be a good time to open it up for questions or comments from the audience.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
If anyone has a question or a comment for Mr. Drew, now's your chance. Go
Yeah,
ahead and
I got one. So when you like crossed the abyss for the first time, did you just do it straight through meditation, or was it like a drug assisted at all, or I guess sacred medicine assisted?
It was a concrete driveway, breathing and laying there and just doing my basic routine. It
Oh,
very
okay.
much just took me over, it seemed like. Seemed like I was drug over the abyss.
But you just were like you made sure you were like out and like on a grounded surface when you did it.
Right. Yep. Yep. No drugs. No.
Hey, Drew, dude, when you said like, like you think that you went to a different dimension, I'm a Muslim. From our perspective, we're told like, like there's higher, dimensions in this reality that we live in. It's just that God has veiled us, protected us from that. So, and when people die, this veil is removed. So, whatever you experienced, there's like maybe you somehow unveiled from that reality, but this was you didn't move to a different place. You're in the same place. It's just there's different layers, to where we live.
That's correct. That's exactly what we say too, is that it's as above, so below. There's a microverse and a macroverse, but they're all interwoven and connected. I agree 100%.
Can I get a question in there?
Yes, what's up?
All right, so I'm studying a bit on the Kabbalah, the Tree of Life Sephiroth, and the Qliphoth as well. And I'm looking at some point to go into such a journey, initiating through both sides. So I'm curious, with your crossing of the abyss, which side of the tree did you cross the abyss on?
Well, I've heard this comparison where you're coming from, but I'm just gonna go from what I know right now, and Da'at is the invisible node of the tree of life. It represents the crossing of the abyss, and it is in between the four, so it's completely centered. I wouldn't say it's on one side or the other, but it's a holy matrimony of the both, and it is very much just an in between. I would say the crossing of the abyss is not that long of an experience. The experience, the real experience, comes after the crossing of the abyss. It's the in between, and that's kind of why it's not on the tree of life literally. When you look at it, it's kind of in between and hidden. The one unsaid, unspoken of, is it's a transition point, and it's not something we hold on to. It's almost like an illusion. That's why it's referred to as like a veil, the veil of Parketh, you say, right? And so it's just a momentary thing, and I think genuinely anybody can have this experience without these practices. I think it has happened to individuals. Um, so it's there, but it's not there kind of thing. It's an illusion too. You can get stuck there. I would even say it's like a limbo state.
Right, I hear that people sometimes get stuck there, and that's where they lose their sanity. Now, so I'm
Right.
curious, there's an entity that inhabits that abyss called Shugal. At least when you deal with the light side of the tree, and that's a masculine based spirit. And when you initiate through the Qliphoth, the counterpart would be uh, Karanzan. And so I was curious if you met either one of them and what they were like. I guess you look like you went through the by way of Shugal, and I guess you were describing like some entity that injected you with some tentacles or something. I don't remember specifically.
On the part of the entity, I'm still not sure because it was such a lucid of a crazy experience, and it was again on the other side. So it could have just like laid me back down and like sung me to sleep for all I know, or injected me with something. I'm not entirely sure. It was very quick. I went right back to sleep and woke up. But on the topic of where I was at in the tree of life, I'm going to be as humble as I can by saying this. I am a neophyte, and I never got past the first order. I very much was in the basics, and just it happened to me. So I'm in the learning parts right now, and I'm studying more and more to get to know these other spheres more personally, and I do hope to actually explore them in their own rights in time. But I think I've had my fill of Kether. It was a wild experience.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna yield back my time so I don't manipulate everything. Thank you.
You're welcome. They were really good questions. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Does anyone else have a question or comment for Drew? So, Drew, this has been really interesting. I'm wondering, was there anything else you wanted to get into or discuss about this or any other related subjects?
Uh, I think we've done a lot today, actually, because this is a really tough topic to describe in its own right, and I think we should probably stop here and let this one soak up, and maybe pick up another episode for another day and go into some practices and see how that goes one day. But for now, I'd like to close up and let this soak in.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great podcast, great content, interesting story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And of course, you and anyone else is welcome to be on the podcast again anytime. Just let me know. I think there's no end of topics that we could get into. And I really enjoy the perspective and the experiences that you shared. So thank you so much, Drew. Thank you so much to the live audience for attending. Make sure you join us on the Roundtable Discord server and check out hashtag RT podcast for our 250 plus podcasts that we've uploaded before on YouTube, on BitChute, on YouTube Live, and we even have a new YouTube channel again, which makes 3 YouTube channels. So check them all out. They all have different episodes available. And of course, keep an eye on hashtag announcements to see upcoming events. We have an event tomorrow at 8 with Ghost about tarot cards. So you're not going to want to miss that one. And lots more coming up every single day at 8 p.m. Central. So that being said, thank you so much, Drew. Thank you, Rafi, for recording and everybody for attending. That will conclude today's podcast. See you again tomorrow at 8. And since we're in the regular room, we can simply talk freely beginning now.